and welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host, Ray Smith. Good afternoon, Ray.
Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm good. You look a little different this time.
Well, I do. I've got this thing on my cell phone because my Wi-Fi is acting up.
Oh, okay.
Can't
Well,
get that thing to go away.
once you move your thumb out of the way, we'll continue on.
Right there. You can cut all of this out, Keith.
Oh no, we don't cut anything out, Ray. You know better than that. So,
all right.
yeah,
Now,
you're good. Well,
okay.
your head's cut off a little bit, but there you go.
All right. That's good.
All right. There we go. All right. Well, we've got our special guest waiting on us. So why don't you introduce her today?
I'd be happy to. Natasha, I'm going to let you say your last name. I don't say it well, so I would ask you to do that. I thought everybody ought to be named Smith. That way it wouldn't be a problem, but it is. Natasha, when she came to Oak Ridge as a part of her road trip that she's on, going to the nuclear sites around the nation. And what we want her to do today is to tell us about that, why she's doing it. And also, Natasha, you need to talk about your previous career some to let us know how you came to be where you are and what you're doing. So we're going to have a good time learning about something that I think is really unique. And since we met in Oak Ridge, we've stayed in touch. And I'm excited for the things that she's planning to do. And hopefully I can be a small part of what she's doing. So, Natasha, start by saying your last name. I do apologize, but tell us your name and
yes,
a little background.
Sure. Thank you both for having me. It's so lovely to be here. So my last name is pronounced Bajema, and fun family history. No one in the family says it correctly. My grandmother eventually just decided on this pronunciation because the people in Michigan couldn't get it right. So you are not alone. You are in very good company. It's a Frisian name, and the J is a Y sound, Bajema, but we go by Bajema. So, well, I have a 20 plus year career in nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, national security. I did graduate work out at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California, as well as the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in Massachusetts, and started my career, 20 more than 20 years ago, and have been kind of stuck in it ever since. So I ended up spending 11 years in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Department of Defense. I worked for the National Defense University, which is a premier military education institution where we teach national security master's degree to senior military officers and civilian equivalents. I ended up spending 3 years on a detail assignment to the Pentagon, where I advised senior leaders there on all things related to weapons of mass destruction. That included nuclear, bio, and chemical weapons. So at some point, to get to the road trip, I no longer work for the Department of Defense. I am now working for a think tank in Washington, D.C. called the Council on Strategic Risks. I'm the director of the Converging Risks Lab there, where we look at the convergence of numerous existential risks. So I'm one of several institutes at CSR, and we think it's really, really important to look at existential risks holistically because they're all at some point interrelated, and we generally don't think of them that way, and that's a problem. But the story behind my road trip kind of starts with me quitting my job at Department of Defense, and back in 2019. And I think I empathize with my parents. I don't have kids of my own, so I can't possibly understand their shock and horror when their daughter in their 40s with a very successful career called up one day and said, "Yeah, so I'm thinking I'm going to quit my job. Can I go live in your empty house in Texas for a few months?" I don't think they ever envisioned that happening. And neither did I, honestly. So it was kind of a long time in coming. I needed to move on to the next step. I'd been at Department of Defense for 11 years. And as I was looking out at the scene in Washington, D.C., there was really nothing of interest to me because I felt like what we were doing was spinning wheels, at least where nuclear risk reduction was concerned. When I started out my career, things looked a lot more optimistic. Back in 2000, Russian and American relations were pretty good. We were working hard to reduce the numbers of strategic nuclear weapons. We were also working in collaboration with Russia to help them reduce their nuclear weapons and reduce the potential risk that terrorists might gain access to weapons that weren't properly secured. Things looked pretty good. I mean, we had a lot of good treaties that were pretty strong. There were still weaknesses, obviously. But 20 years later, in 2019, when I'm kind of thinking about what's the next step, I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing the same thing without declaring it insanity. Because I didn't feel like we were making progress. In fact, I felt like we were regressing, and I had entered public service because I wanted to do something with my life that hopefully would have impact, have a greater meaning. And so I decided that maybe I should do something completely different and look at getting into the TV and film industry. And it was an incredibly blue sky dream. I don't have training in film and TV. I have zero connections in Hollywood. So my initial step was quit job, move to Texas, and then figure it out. So here I am in Texas in 2019. 6 months later, we have the start of a global pandemic. Very awkward time to begin a brand new career, especially when Hollywood was shutting down all of its production. There's no way to break in there. There was no point in moving to LA to only have to get part-time jobs to like pay for the rent. And so I decided to stay in Texas. I also really loved Rockport. It's on the coast, and I was very surprised about how much I really enjoyed my life there. And so I decided to stick around, but I was kind of left with the question, and I hadn't yet gotten my job at the think tank yet. So I was kind of self-employed, or unemployed as my parents might call it. And I was doing consulting. So I was trying to pick up some consulting gigs to put a roof over my head, but I was thinking, how am I going to break into this new career? And it was October of 2020. I was on the phone with my friend lamenting basically life during the pandemic and how one was supposed to do anything. And I had been reviewing kind of my planners over the last few years, and I tend to write, bucket lists or, kind of aspirational goals for the next 5 years, thinking out. And I kept coming across this very strange entry: own an RV and go on a road trip, an extended road trip. And this flashed back to my childhood years, my teenage years, when my parents would take us on vacation, camping vacation out west to the national parks. And my very first experience at a national park was Badlands National Park. And it's quite stunning and breathtaking. And for a kid to be able to climb over all those rocks, I mean, it was amazing. It really, I think, left an imprint in my mind. And so I could see this, many, many years later in my little, bucket list aspirations, because up until this point, I had neither camped nor owned an RV or anything, because I've been traveling worldwide. I've been working for the Department of Defense, traveling to places like Egypt, not thinking about camping and visiting national parks. And so I was like, what if I bought an RV, went on a road trip, and visited nuclear weapons related sites? And my friend, who's really not in the business, she's like, yeah, that sounds interesting. And I'm like, no, time out. This is, it kind of came out of an experience I had just as the pandemic was taken off. I was a fellow, an N-Square fellow. We were a group of folks with nuclear weapons related experience that were trying to be more creative in our approach to having impact. And we went out to Mill Valley, California to visit a former Nike Hercules missile site. And prior to that, I'd heard, of course, about Nike missile Hercules, but they were long out of operation. And so I never really thought about them. I never thought about what they were. And I didn't think about, the implications of those systems. until I was standing there at it's a restored Nike Hercules site out in Mill Valley. It's amazing. I recommend everyone go visit it. But as they were kind of lifting up the missiles to point to the sky, and one of the tour guides was actually a missileer. He was 18 and he was a missileer, and he was responsible for launching those nuclear armed missiles at a Soviet bomber squadron, should that have occurred. And so I, have a long habit of asking very impertinent questions. And it was a Captain Obvious question, but I said, so if we were to launch one of these nuclear armed missiles at a Soviet bomber squadron, we're over US territory right now. So wouldn't that be an airburst nuclear weapon detonation? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so that wouldn't be such a great idea, right? He's like, yeah, not such a great idea. I mean, obviously the damage down below would depend on altitude and
Sure.
and all of those things, but it could at least take out the power grid, which would have been also very traumatic, not to mention, the bomber squadron, breaking up and falling down on the earth below. And so this particular site was literally 3 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge, just to put this in perspective. And it was one of 12 sites around the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm just like, so we had situated nuclear armed missiles around US cities to defend our country. And that moment kind of like, it was not just the kind of absurdity of that. It was, and thinking that the government maybe didn't think this through a lot. I'm not sure, but it was also, and it didn't surprise me. I'd worked in Department of Defense for 11 years, and sometimes we do stupid things in the name of national security. And, but it was also just the location. So it was the fact that I was standing, I'd just driven over the Golden Gate Bridge, and I was only a few miles from San Francisco. That kind of idea that nuclear weapons weren't way out there. They weren't something that our adversaries had. They were actually right inside the United States around our major cities. And that didn't make me feel so good. And so that was kind of the beginning of the idea of the relationship between geography and nuclear weapons in American mindset, that if perhaps Americans started thinking more about nuclear weapons being very much here in our country, around our homes, places we love to go to vacation, where we grew up, that might start to leave more of an imprint and cause greater awareness. Because what I want is Americans to see that they have a stake in what happens in our nuclear weapons future, and that they hold their politicians accountable. So that was kind of how the road trip was born. Of course, I had a lot of logistics to figure out. So once I had the idea, I had to get a camper, I had to get a truck, and I had to make the trip and leave. And so right at this time, I got the job offer to work at the Council on Strategic Risks. And when I was talking to my CEO, I said, I'd love to take on the job. However, I have two caveats. One, I'll never move back to Washington, D.C. Two, I want to go on this road trip, because I'd already told her about it. And she said, okay, we'll work it out. And getting a camper and a truck in the middle of the pandemic was no easy feat. So around February 2021, I knew I had to order these things in order to start in 2022. So it was always my plan to start the trip formally in 2022, because I needed to give myself enough lead time. And so in February 2021, I started reading about the chip shortage. And I was like, oh crap, I need a truck. I need to get a truck right away. And in order to get the truck, I needed to know what camper I wanted. And so I had to put the order in on the camper. So I had to figure that out before. I had never set foot in one of these campers, because there were none on the lot, because it was in the middle of the pandemic and demand was at an all-time high. And so I ordered a very expensive camper without ever setting foot in one, based on pictures I saw. And then I was able to buy the truck, which I had never ridden in because they didn't have any on the lot. So, but you really can't argue with it, because you have to have a Super Duty truck to carry one of these campers. So I put the orders in, the truck came late, the camper came late. So, but the truck and the camper were united finally in August of 2021. and I started to take my first road trips to practice and get used to it. And also, I wanted to start doing some video footage shoots around Texas. So I had by this time gotten some generous funding from the Outrider Foundation to produce a pilot episode. So prior to putting this on YouTube, I had this grand dream that I was going to walk into Netflix and pitch this as a show. And a lot of people laughed hilariously at me and kind of brought me back down to reality and said, that's a nice dream, but you should probably think about how you're really going to do it, because the chances are like winning a lottery. And I had to agree with them after. I was like, yeah, if I were Netflix, I would be like, who is this person? And what does she really bring to the table? And where's her credibility? And no, and so I decided that I was going to have to do this all myself, and that YouTube was a great way to get the videos out. I was still going to produce this pilot episode. And so I started going on some trips in the fall to get Texas footage. And then I left on my road trip on January 1 of this year. So I'll take a break here if you have any questions based on all of that.
Oh, that's a good laying of the groundwork of how you got to where you are, or close to where you are now. So thank you for doing that. Keith, does anything come to your mind that you'd like to ask her? Keith, you still there?
I know. I want to hear the rest of the story. I want to hear what's happened since January.
Oh,
So I will ask. So I guess you got a heavy duty truck and then like a fifth wheel type camper that you pull behind it, or?
No, sorry, it's a truck camper. So it actually
Okay.
goes into the bed of the
Okay.
truck. And so I have a Ford Super Duty F-350 dually truck. It is
Yeah.
massive.
Right. So it's a big, and you've never driven one of those before, or?
I drove a Mini Cooper.
Yeah. That's big difference. Big difference. And even though you have this incredible background in nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, and all these things that you did, you said you didn't have any background whatsoever in filmmaking or video production or anything like that.
The only camera I've ever used is the one on my iPhone.
Right.
Every other camera that's not point and click, I can't figure out.
Sure.
No.
I understand. So tell me, what was your idea? You talked a little bit about this program and these videos. What was kind of your vision?
So it was kind of based on, that visit to Mill Valley, to the Nike Hercules missile site. It kind of, it made me wonder if we were to make nuclear weapons less abstract, maybe a little less scary, because people tend to shut down when we talk about nuclear annihilation and, the end of the world and apocalypse, they can't process, right? So obviously nuclear weapons are incredibly scary and incredibly destructive, and we should not understate that. However, how do you get people to embrace thinking about it? And I'd spent 20 years in this field, and I can't count how many times I had experiences at Thanksgiving or Christmas where I'd go home and my family members would ask me what I'm doing, and as soon as I would say nuclear weapons, yeah, let's go talk about something fun. So
Sure.
that was very much in my spirit. So, if I left Department of Defense to try to have impact and to do so differently. So if I was going to do that through entertainment, then I had to kind of explore what that would look like. And there are different ways to go about it. There's the thriller movies, which is the typical way that had treatment that we've seen in the past. There's satire. So Dr. Strangelove is a satire. And I decided that what I wanted to do is I wanted to make the whole experience as personable as possible. And by doing that via camping and doing that with my dogs and going on a road trip in my midlife and my midlife crisis, as
Sure.
my parents would call it. And I didn't buy a Corvette. No, I bought a truck camper and an F-350. But, I was hoping that people would follow the journey and on the way that they would start to discover and realize and think about nuclear weapons. And it would be a safe way to do it because I wasn't trying to freak them out. I was just kind of showing them, hey, this is what's here. This is why it's here. This is what it means. And leave them with that while, showing, beautiful sights, camping, dogs, things like that. So that was kind of the vision behind it.
Kind of a personal story about you, but with a deeper purpose in what you're going to show. So where are you? Where are you now? You've been gone since January. How far along are you? And have you been putting anything on YouTube yet, or are you waiting to get everything done to where you can finish and produce a whole film?
Well, yes, that is an answer. So I have been on the road now for only 74 days again, because I left on January 1. My brand new camper had already been in the shop in October of the previous year for 30 days to fix really vital things, such as the hot water heater. Basically, about 10 things broke. I got the camper, and within 1 week, 10 things broke. And so then when I got the camper back and I departed on January 1, I had fingers crossed, but I think that my trust in the camper was severely shaken by this point, because when you start to go out on your camping trips and everything is breaking left and right and it's brand new, and I'm not a technician. I didn't know that I had to be one to do RVing. I now believe that you do probably need to know some things about, but it was a brand new camper. Is this really what happens? And so I took off January 1, and every other day starting on January 1, more things kept breaking. Vital things. The air conditioner broke. There were leaks in the slides. Leaks, water, and RVs do not go well together. So when I hit, I think it was day 16 or 17, maybe 18. So about less than 3 weeks in January, 12 things had broken. Additional things had broken on the camper, and not living without AC was not going to work. I knew summer was coming, and this has been a hot summer. I think we wouldn't have made it, because I have dogs as well. So in order for me to leave and do a video shoot, I need to know that my dogs are going to be cool and safe. And so I think it was January 19 or 20 timeframe where I made some calls around Florida. I was near the Fort Myers, Florida at this time. And I made some calls to RV dealers to find out if I could get my RV in for repairs. And they said, sure, we can get you in March, and then it might be 60 days from there. And I was not going to sit in Florida for several months waiting to find out with my kid. I was like, well, I have to go home. So unfortunately, 19 days in, the worst case scenario, well, not worst case, I guess things could have been much worse. I could have gotten a car accident or something. I had to turn around and go back home. And that was I had been doing social media. I had been putting out videos. I had been like full steam ahead, momentum. That took the wind out of my sails in a way I don't know if I can describe it. I went home. I felt like it was a defeat. I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to hit the road again. I felt like I was disappointing my fans. I felt like I was going to, let down everybody. And I had also discovered some things about camp, or about being in an RV, that I wasn't really happy about. I was more isolated than I ever felt, even during the pandemic, while camping. And it was a really tough experience. I was new to everything and going through all of that. So I went home, and I was hoping that I would have the determination and courage to leave again, but I wasn't sure. And so I finally made it home in February 17 or so, took the camper in. The camper was in the shop for 66 days or so. It was 2 months in the shop. There was a long list of things that needed to be done, and the manufacturer was not helpful. They didn't want to live up to their warranty. And so there was a whole bunch of stress and saga. So I ended up being back in Texas, and because I was in Texas and I thought I was only going to be in Texas after the road trip was complete, I was starting to think about what comes next. All right, this is done. What comes next? And, So I bought a house. It was being built. I was pretty sure I didn't want to live in an RV anymore. I was absolutely certain that the nomad lifestyle was not for me. I love road trips. I love camping. I do not love living in an RV. I love my space, and there's, home and my home life. And so I ended up buying a house, and finally I got the camper back April 29. And so I had been planning to start the trip again June 1, but it was very much, I was kind of like, should I do this? I really wanted to carry through my vision. I felt like I had done it justice, and I felt like I had gone through all of this trouble to buy the camper and buy the RV. Did I really want to sell them after not having, completed my vision? I had a lot of people telling me, say, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes we have to do things that we don't like to do because of the greater goal. I mean, I did a PhD, for crying out loud. Did anybody think that was fun? No. That was not fun. But I finished that too. And so but I was also very concerned, if I started my trip on June 1, would not all the same things happen? Would I have to turn back again? And anyway, I started the trip again in June 1. I'm currently in Cannon Beach, Oregon. So I have traveled more than 5,000 miles now. The camper has been stable. I want to knock on wood every time I say that, because every time I say things have been going well, I'm waiting for the basically proverbial shit to hit the fan.
Sure.
And I have been, let's see. I went to Louisiana, which I had been in before, because I went to Shreveport, to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana back in January. I had, and then I went to Mississippi. So one thing I missed in Mississippi on my trip in January, because I couldn't pull logistics off, was a visit to the Tatum Dome site in Mississippi, which where they tested 2 nuclear weapons underground in the 1960s. And so I was able to organize a trip out there with the Forestry Agency of Mississippi. And so I got that site. Then I went on to Alabama. I went to the Air and Space, I don't know what they call it, the Space Center, I think Space and Rocket Center, in Huntsville, Alabama. And then I went up to Oak Ridge, and I met Ray, and I saw the museums there. It was fantastic. I went to Dayton, Ohio. They have an amazing Air Force museum there. Highly recommend it. I spent 90 minutes there, basically running through it. That's how big it is. 90 minutes running. I went 4 or 5 miles. I tracked how that's how far the distance I went. Then I ended up going to Michigan, where I have friends and family who I hadn't seen since before the pandemic. It was really important for me personally to make that stop. I went up through the UP, Wisconsin, to Minnesota, where my parents and my brother and his family live. And again, important to see those people that I haven't seen for many years during the pandemic. And then from Minnesota, basically the trip began again. And I went to South Dakota to the Minuteman missile site that Ray also visited. Very interesting, Badlands National Park. Stopped off in Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And then I went up to Great Falls, Montana, and I visited Malmstrom Air Force Base. They have a small museum there dedicated to the Minuteman and to intercontinental ballistic missiles. And it was very interesting. Very glad that I made that trip as well. And then I drove through Glacier National Park, which was harrowing.
Mhm.
My first major mountain drive. Oh my gosh. So I spent a little time in Glacier, not too much, because again, I have to keep going. So I'm kind of getting a taste of things, probably for the future. Then I ended up going through to Spokane, Washington, where I hung out for a week while I remotely closed on my house. So my house was finished. And as you recall, we were supposed to have an interview then, but unfortunately all my hotspots had been used up 2 weeks prior to their reset. And so I was in internet purgatory for 2 weeks. From Spokane, I went to Seattle, and I spent a couple days out on the Puget Sound in Kitsap State Park, which is just north of Trident Base, which is part of Kitsap, Naval Base Kitsap, which is where they have the nuclear armed submarines operating out of. So got some video there, and now I'm in Oregon. So that's kind of the trip. I've been collecting footage. When I restarted my trip in June, I had lost a lot of that momentum that I first had in January, and I was kind of not feeling it, honestly. And I made a deal with myself that I was not going to put the added pressure of producing video while being on the road, while working a full-time job, that I was going to collect all the footage. I was going to go home and I was going to produce these videos one a week. So when I get home, we'll see the YouTube channel get new life, because I'll be putting out the videos that I had collected in January, and then the trip starting in June. And actually that's going to work out well because I finished the pilot episode. So when I went home to Texas, I had some additional time on my hands.
Yeah.
And I was able to pull together all of the Texas footage that I had put together to kind of create a cohesive story, a 30-minute episode. That was the original vision to pitch to Netflix. And I thought, why don't we just kind of like put it together? If I ever get an opportunity to pitch this idea, I have the pilot. And so I finished that and I have submitted it to 8 film festivals. So there you go.
Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, good. Have you heard from any of them yet?
No, the first one I hear from is in October. So, you have to kind of track the calendar of these film festivals because you have to enter them before they take place. And I wanted to make sure that I could attend every single one that I was submitting to if I were accepted, because I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. And so I had to wait until I couldn't. For example, I wanted to do the Austin Film Festival, but it actually is being held in, I think, October, and I'm not home yet.
Right. I understand. Yeah, speaking of film festivals, I'm the founder and director of the Knoxville Film Festival, and we're getting ready to have ours in about 5 weeks. So
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So, well, cool. Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean that is quite the adventure. That's for sure.
It's
it's funny you talk about living in a camper. My wife, we've been married 30 years, and she loves to go camping. And I told her from the very beginning, I said, honey, my idea of roughing it's Motel 6. So I am. That's what we did every summer growing up, and I had enough camping. So, but so how much longer do you plan on traveling?
Yeah, so I think because of all the things I mentioned before, losing the momentum, etc., I decided, we're going to do an accelerated version of this. I'm going to, I have a new house now I want to get back to and move into. Yeah. So I'm wrapping things up in October 18. I'll be back home in Texas, but I have a lot of distance yet to cover. So I'll be going down through California, mostly just to go south.
Yeah.
I need to get south somehow. And I love California, and I want to stop off in Monterey, my old stomping grounds from grad school. Mm-hmm. I'll be going to Sequoia National Forest, but then I'm going to Las Vegas. And hopefully, I heard the Nevada test site has reopened for tours, but they're giving them very infrequently. So I am hoping I'm lucky. They're going to announce the tour dates on August 29, and I'm going to be waiting at my computer to see if I can snag one of them. But I already know when I'm going to be in Las Vegas, so it really depends on, do I get lucky or not? Right. Worst case scenario, I'll visit the Atomic Testing Museum there. You can't take video footage at the Nevada test site anyway, so it would only be for me personally, and to talk about it, to the viewers, but I can't take any pictures or footage from it. And then I'll be doing some personal kind of bucket list stuff. I've been to the Grand Canyon, but I want to go back. Bryce Canyon, I've never been there. I'll be going to Arches National Park in Utah. Then I'll be crossing the Rockies back into Colorado. I'll be going to Rocky Flats, which is now Wildlife Reserve. Then I'll be going down to Colorado Springs. I'm planning to make a trip out to Cheyenne Mountain State Park, where I'll talk about Cheyenne Mountain. I've been in Cheyenne Mountain before when I had clearance and all of that, so I've been inside the mountain. but yeah, I can't get access. What I really learned is that despite my career, I can't really get access to anything that the public can't get access to. There's a great suspicion of anyone who wants to talk about things that are going on behind the veil, so to speak. And then when I finish up Colorado, I'll be going down to Santa Fe. I'll check out Los Alamos, go around the town. I think there's a lot to see there. And then Albuquerque, they have another museum there that is really interesting that I haven't been to. Then I'll be going down to White Sands, where I'm actually, and this is one of the exciting things about rethinking this whole trip, is I'm actually going to be there when they open it to the public. They do that twice a year, and one of the times is on October 15. So I'll be able to see Trinity Site on October 15. I'm super excited. This is definitely a bucket list item for me. And then White Sands, of course, is where they have a lot of the missile testing, and it has an amazing national park there as well. And then I'll be heading home.
Well, that sounds good. Let me tell you that the test site is a good tour. I've been there. We actually drove up the hill to Area 51 until the guard in the pickup truck started driving toward us, and when he did, we turned around and left. So you'll when you get to the Sedan crater, you'll be almost to Area 51. Now, the Test Museum in Las Vegas is a really good museum too. I've been there as well. And then I got to go to Trinity. I actually spent 4 hours in Trinity by myself, just with the public relations person taking me there. You'll be going on one of the public tours, so there'll be a lot of people there. But I really enjoyed the time that I could spend there just alone. It was a phenomenal site. So you've got some really good things ahead of you. And by the way, Bryce Canyon is in fact the prettiest canyon you'll ever see. You'll love it. And of course, the Grand Canyon is grand. I agree with you there. But Bryce Canyon is really my favorite of the canyon. So you're going to have some good scenes as you wrap up your tour. So I'll look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing what you're doing. So, and again, really enjoyed having you in Oak Ridge. And I think that our meeting there was good. And I understand more about what you were doing than I did before you came. The word that got to me was, watch out for her, she's coming.
Well, and I'm really anxious to see your work, your video, what you've done and what you plan to do with it. So
it's too late for this year, but you need to keep Keith's Knoxville Film Festival in mind for next year. Okay.
Definitely. I have my open on the calendars. Like I said, it's really kind of following the calendar year. And so I don't think I'll stop at 8. That was literally basically what I was ready to do right now. But I'm going to put Austin on the list. Love to come to Knoxville. I think Tennessee is absolutely stunning. What a beautiful state. I'd driven through it at one point, but I was a kid and didn't appreciate good things back then.
We always have the film festival the middle of September. So you can come up and spend a little bit of time in Oak Ridge. And if you plan on staying a couple of 3 weeks, you'll start to see the leaves changing in the Smokies. So it will be beautiful. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your journey. I mean, it's an amazing story. It really is an amazing story. What you did before, and in I wouldn't say midlife, but early midlife, you decided to have a real adventure on something that is important to you, and you're in a position to be able to do it. So I think that's pretty amazing. I really do, and hopefully others will be able to share your journey, with the videos that you're producing. So.
Well, thank you, both of you, for having me on the show. It was fun to tell everyone about my story.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Ray. Now we're going to come back in about 3 weeks. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. We we have to make room for your film festival, and we'll
Yeah.
do that. In about 3 weeks, we're going to have Shirley Raines on with us. She has a book on leadership. She's written books on birds and on butterflies.
Butterflies. Right.
Yeah. I told somebody the other day, the reason I can't remember names is all of my space in the brain that I had reserved for names, I've erased, and I put in historical facts and and so I no longer names. So I got butterfly in there too and Misty.
Right.
But right, Shirley will be a good one to have on. She, of course, had a career as a president of the university in Memphis, and she's written a story about that, and it turns out to be a good leadership book. So I think we'll having her on, and then we will take another short break while you do your film festival.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Natasha, Ray. It's good to see you. Thank you so much. And folks, thanks for watching. We'll see you in a few weeks.